What happens to a human being when we become disconnected?
Well, we go completely against our innate humanity. Think about ancient groups of humans who they raised children together, they lived together. There wasn't this idea of the small family unit, but an entire village would be raising one another. There would be the fireside, and we would gather around it, and we were connected to one another. So when we become disconnected, we become fearful. We start noticing the differences between one another, which, by the way, do not exist because we are all part of the same race, and it's called the human race. And fights and oppression and inequality and injustice start to take over. That's what happens when we become disconnected.
What does disconnection really mean? Because there's we throw around disconnection from each other, right? We'll throw around the word connected to the point where I think it's become cheapened. What does it really mean? I've got a connection on LinkedIn. Am I connected to you, right? And then there's also a challenge of connection to ourselves, connection to the planet and Mother Earth. What is connection and disconnection really referring to here?
Have you ever sat on a train with someone and just a chance moment have meant that you have connected, and then maybe there's a really deep moment of connection which maybe that brings about an emotional response, and then you walk away and you never see that person again. Sure. But what you've done is you've connected into the fact that we are both humans, and there's nothing separating us. I think that to me is so important. Humanity has fallen out of love with itself, and the invitation, and surely the only answer for a better future, is for us to fall back in love with ourselves and realize that we are the solution. We together are the solution to all the world's problems. But we have to be together. We have to be united to do that.
Is that currently realistically feasible, to play devil's advocate, right? Because it not only is all 8 billion of us being on the same page one thing, but even 5 people in a room being on the same page, right? Even Londoners, we're both in London right now, being on the same page, let alone look at political divisions within like one country.
I don't think I'm saying that we all have to agree. In fact, I think well-held spaces where humans can disagree, and for that to be really well facilitated, and for us to be able to say, I don't agree with you, and that's okay. But there's a massive polycrisis that we are now starting to see the genuine impact of, and it's only going to get worse. And unless we can agree that we as a human race need to work together despite differences, then I don't know how. I think it will feel very unrealistic.
Well, agree, I think, is an interesting word, because I think most of us would agree already that we need to work together. We're just not doing it, right? So knowledge and application of knowledge are two different things. And especially now with the internet and whatever, knowledge is freer than ever. And therefore reaching each other is freer than ever. Understanding that the vast majority of us do want the same end feelings, we just have different ways of thinking we get there, right? So I think we all agree that we need to work together. Everyone else needs to come and work together with me the way I see things. Yeah. Okay, so because obviously I'm the one who's right, says my ego. So it's beyond just agreement, isn't it? Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the show, or back to the show for those of you who aren't new here. Getting lots of new faces these days, and so I just wanted to take a quick sec to introduce myself. Hey, I'm Seven, and also to give you a quick announcement. As a little bit of background, this show used to be very focused on what it meant to be a leader, but I quickly realized I already had my answer, which is that I believe you already are one. And it's just about becoming more of that person you want to be. So we're talking about the world, self-leadership, personal development, humanity, discovery, self-discovery, and so much more. This is a place where deep conversations happen in a way that helps you become more of that person you want to be. And so if you appreciate that and you want to help us grow, but I know you're tired of people hearing, we've been hearing this for over a decade, like and subscribe and share the episode, and I get it, but look, it is genuinely the biggest and best thing that you can do. I don't play ads or any crap like that. I do this and take this time to say thank you because I appreciate you and where this show is going. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Lots of love, and let's get on with the episode.
Yes, it is. I think I feel that the solution is creating spaces and vehicles where humans can step in, perhaps without even knowing that they're stepping into a space where they might have their mind changed or they might feel suddenly galvanized to step into something, agenda-free vehicles and spaces to enable the type of behavior which in the world I'm working in we would call citizen behavior, to bring forth that unity that we so need. Because you're right, you can't have a leader saying, come on everyone, let's do it this way, because immediately, as soon as you have a leader trying to say that, you'll have the opposition.
So let's take a step back and really practically understand. Let's not assume that all of us, everyone listening and whatever, knows just how bad the consequences of disconnection is. So let's take a step back. Some of the things we've talked about before are fear, living in silos. You just used the word agenda. Territorialism, is that a word? Being territorial. What are the challenges that come with disconnection practically, and how does that manifest, and why is that so problematic?
Just to check I understand the question. So what are the problems with disconnection? What practically happens? What happens? Yes. What emerges? Well, oppression and inequality are two huge ones. So if disconnection equals division equals them and us, and you have genuine pockets of society, people who have become marginalized because of various reasons, rather than us all realizing that we're all the same race. I believe that then with the climate crisis, the world I'm working in, I'm realizing that is hugely connected to the climate crisis, because if marginalized people are probably going to experience the climate crisis greater than unmarginalized, and then there's the cost of living crisis, which is also affecting groups who are being oppressed and marginalized more than others. So you're just going to have things being better or things staying the same for those who are not being marginalized, and it's all going to get a lot worse for people who are.
And that worse, again, what does that look like? I'm playing devil's advocate here because I've actually worked in this space before, and I get it. But we've got a lot of global discourse about this, talking about the results of being disconnected. It becomes an awkward, really insidious, self-perpetuating cycle where I'm disconnected from you, so I've got assumptions about you. Those assumptions tell me that you're a this or you're a that, and therefore I don't want to connect with you, and this cycle just continues. So right now, there's this big, quote-unquote DEI pushback, for example. People are analyzing, so some people, even do we believe in climate change? Even that's getting pushed back, right? Now, it's not so bad here in the UK compared to the US, where I'm from, and but because of media and branding and the internet, that infects everywhere. And then so practically, again, this disconnection looking like, people treating each other worse. Are they less willing to listen? I'm wondering what injustice looks like and why it is injustice. Why should the folks listening go, yes, this is injustice, and I should feel because of it? Because human beings make decisions emotionally, and we justify them rationally. This makes perfect sense because of this reason, that reason, and no, it was just an emotional response. So what should I be really caring about, and why?
It's such a huge question. My I will sound naive here, and apologies to people with bigger brains than me who are listening. But my view is that surely every single human should have the right to be treated the same as everyone else, and they should not be, they should not face injustice due to their gender, their race, their religion, their sexuality, their economic background, and the divisions that are in place. I believe they can be reduced. I do believe they can be reduced. And to take an example of what I believe is coming very soon, if you think about how the country currently responds to immigration and race with the riots last year and just recently as well, and that's with the current level of immigration. Now, the global south is going to be receiving far worse effects of climate change than we are up here in the north. So we will start to see climate migration very soon. Now, in the worlds that I am working in, a huge driver of the work we're doing, which is trying to create assembly culture in local areas to connect people more, to create these vehicles, these spaces where people can disagree well and in a well-held, facilitated manner, to try and bring communities together to reduce those divisions, so that when inevitable climate migration happens, we do not turn against people and we don't create huge barriers and we don't fall into fascism, because that's a genuine threat. And if we can create more connected communities, I hope that climate migrants can be welcomed, and because we're all, again, sorry to bang on the same drum, we're all part of the same race, human race.
I think and I appreciate this just two white people having this conversation, but the word race has always been challenging for me, because like I grew up with fantasy books and fantasy video games, and I'm like, different races are like elves. You know what I mean? It's it's a term that came from racist beliefs about how different people, different cultures physically were, how we worked. But actually, we know that there were about 6 different types of sapiens hundreds of thousands of years ago, and one survived, Homo sapiens, and all of us are that. So there's this sense of oneness and togetherness that even our language, even when we're well-meaning with that language, like subconsciously conditions us to think we're more separate than we are. And it's almost like, how do we dispel that illusion of separation?
I think we have to start getting practical. I mean, I'm always going to say this because that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to create assemblies in local communities. I'm hoping to create spaces that can hold citizen behavior and encourage citizen behavior. And just because a lot of people, they want to do the right thing, but the world's been set up with through a capitalist lens, and everything's about profit and getting that needle to go the right way. And actually, I believe what we need to do is get very practical and go, what does each community need? What does every neighborhood need to start knitting people back together? I work for a charity called Community Organisers, and we do what we say on the tin. We go out there and we try and organize communities, but we start by teaching them the importance of listening to one another across so-called divides and barriers, and to start from a place of listening, and then start gathering communities together, start working together on a very practical level towards an action to make their lives better, and not rely on a system that I think we can agree on is broken in this country. The systems are broken, they're creaking, and the difference between someone who still believes the system's going to solve everything is someone walks past litter on the street and says, when are the council going to pick that up? And a citizen would say, oh, I'm just going to pick that up. I'm going to do it for myself. We need more citizens.
Okay, so how would you teach me how to listen? It sounds like this is a crux of the challenge then, is that we don't want to listen, or we do, but we don't know how, or we think we're listening, we're not. So the way that you teach your communities listening as that number one first step, teach me how to listen.
So first of all, I think it's important to say that this listening is done on, let's say, a street level or a neighborhood level. To make a genuine grassroots change in an area, it's about think of the street where you live, and can you tell me, the street where you live, do you think you know what people feel about living there?
Not even remotely.
Do you talk to your neighbours?
One of them.
Okay. Do you say hi to any others?
Yeah, sure.
How would you feel about saying, okay, on Saturday, I'm going to knock on the door of every one of my neighbours and just go, hi, I'm Seben, I live there. I'd love to understand how it feels for you living here. What's life like here? What's great about living here? And what might you want to improve? And then you stop talking. And then you listen to them and you take on board what they're saying without your agenda, and you remember it, and you might ask them, thanks so much for sharing this with me. Would you be interested in maybe doing a regular meetup? And then if you do that along your whole street, you might get half of them, quarter of them to maybe it's the pub, the cafe, the local cafe, to the park. And you can meet up and have that conversation, but on a wider level, so that, maybe there's 10 of you. What's so great about living here? What don't we like? Could we do anything about the things that we don't like? Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we could organise a litter pick, because the litter around here is awful. Yeah, and I'm not really sure that there's anything for the young people to do. Well, I don't mind having like a drop-in morning at the local cafe. Shall we organise that? Imagine if that was happening in every single street, and it wouldn't take very long. And think how much perceived difference there might be on a street, when actually if you bring them all together, you'll think, no, we're all neighbours. We're all here living together. Let's work together and make this place a little bit better. Imagine that on a neighborhood level replicated.
Well, so why don't we do it then? Because I think we used to, theoretically, culturally. That's how human beings operated for the vast majority of our existence. Even when we started coming together in cities, because we didn't have other ways of doing things and getting things done.
Do you know what? And this is the hopeful bit. It's only been wonky for about 75 years.
Really? Even that long? I would think even less.
Would you?
Yeah, true. The last 25.
Well then, who knows? Someone needs to write in and tell us, when did it get wonky? But yeah, I mean, my mum, for example, my mum's in her mid-80s, and the streets she talks about were very different to the streets that we know about. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not an expert here, but one might assume that the rise of digital, the gaming and social media probably have reduced that social interaction. It's a fair hunch, wouldn't you say? But I don't know when it's all stopped. It hasn't stopped where I live. I live in this amazing little village in Sussex. And it is exactly like that. I once dropped my phone in the park, and someone dropped it round, and she said, well, I knew it was you because your kids' photo's on the front. Everyone knows everyone. We're all raising our kids by the village, but that's really rare.
That's so rare to hear.
Wouldn't it be great if it was happening everywhere?
Yeah. Well, do you know what I'm finding really funny to think about is there are quite a few of us, myself included, where our goal is to make enough money to leave the city and start our own village or move to a village somewhere with all our friends. There's this sense of village community that I think a lot of us actually want, but there's a tunnel vision, an unconsciousness that takes place in the moment, especially when you're in a place like London or any big city, because I assume like that neighbor's going to leave soon, that neighbor doesn't care, that neighbor's an asshole, whatever. I live in a 20-story apartment building, right, with 7 or 8 or 9 floors on each, flats on each floor. That actually isn't that many people, but we have a WhatsApp group and once or twice a year party instead of what you're describing. Yeah. And that's the best that most people get. And most people don't know each other well. They at best know of each other and are on the building WhatsApp group, And we don't have, oh, I knew that was your kids. I can see the picture. Yeah. We're not helping raise each other's children. We're friendly, but we stay in each other's little silos.
And that's the tragedy and the beauty that would happen if it was more like My Village Everywhere. And funnily enough, so where I live, I actually have to get in my car to go to the supermarket. I have to use my car to take my kids to the swimming pool, blah, blah, blah. Actually, we would be better off living in cities because we can use public transport, we can walk places, we can use our bikes. So actually, we want people to stay in cities in order to, we actually don't want people to live places where they have to get in their car to drive around, unless everyone has an electric car. So we do want people to stay in cities, but it is possible. But I find in my job, I find it so frustrating that there's an entire charity that's been in existence for 10 years called Community Organisers that basically exists to try and reconnect humans together, to try and recreate the behaviours that were once everyday and normal. So, we have partnerships with, like a corporate partner to go and help communities listen on a street level and on a neighborhood level. And that's wonderful. But part of it, you're thinking, well, when did this need a charity to come in and get involved? Why can't people just talk to their neighbors in a way that they used to?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's, the evolution of humanity requires certain steps backward. Whenever you take a certain step forward, it feels like I'm collaborating on writing a Substack article right now through my Substack with another author who his publication is called Undividing. So we're something very similar to what we're describing. It's not actually a word in the dictionary, but it immediately makes sense, right? We are divided. How do we undivide? Yeah. How do we come back together? Which, of course, begs the question, why do we need to? The more connected we became superficially, the more disconnected we became realistically and, emotionally, deeply, mentally, spiritually, whatever words work for people, the less together, the greater oneness we had superficially, the less oneness we had internally, it feels like. So I now have these listening skills, but I still have a slight problem, which is that I ask the question and I think I'm listening, but really I've still got my agenda because I don't know how to move it out of the way. I can shut up, but I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm not listening to it because I'm filtering it through my paradigms, through my lenses, through my belief systems, and through what my answers already are to the questions. And that is my agenda. How do I get that agenda out of the way? Is that a bad thing? And then what do I do with this?
It's not a bad thing. It's a human thing. I mean, I'm sitting here. You are so clever, Seven, that I'm sitting here desperately trying to listen so carefully to what you're saying, but also thinking, what question is he going to ask me? And I want to be able to give him a good answer back because I want this to be a good discussion, right? So I'm doing that as well. But community organizing, connecting with your street, connecting with your neighbors takes ages, right? So this first chat, so you're not going to solve anything with your first picnic on that first Saturday. It's just a tiny little step into building that relationship. I'm the operational lead for something called Humanity Project, which is building assembly culture through existing community organizations in local areas. When we first started to build this, we set out to try and put on as many assemblies as possible. When I say assembly, I don't mean a school assembly. I mean a popular assembly, a people's assembly, which is a deliberative democracy. It's people-powered democracy, getting people in a room, asking a question, getting them into breakout groups, asking them to deliberate that question and come back with a sort of a group answer to move forward, a mandate. And we tried to get as many assemblies put on as possible. And it didn't work because we had no relationships built in the local areas. We were just relying on volunteers, putting up stalls in the high street saying, come along to the assembly. And then one assembly was held and then everyone was burnt out and no one ever put on a second one. So what we're doing now is we're going into existing organizations that are already locally rooted. So you'd think the relationships are already there, but it's still super slow work because you can't rush this kind of work, this sort of human relationship development. It moves at the speed of trust. So your impatience in your brain going, I've got this agenda and I want to move this forward, we sort of just have to remove that and go, well, this is moving at the speed of trust and it doesn't matter if I don't get what I believe out of this in the first thing. It's the first stepping stone towards a relationship. And when human relationships are the key thing here.
Really interesting because I'm thinking about another one of these words that's become cheapened because it's become overused. And that word is community.
I knew you were going to say that. You're right. It is overused. Yeah. We like neighborhood. Neighborhood's good. And now I'm not going to remember the name of the person who said it, but I was reading the news The week that we speak has been a pretty bad one for news, and there are wildfires burning all over. There are floods killing people across the whole world, not to mention the conflicts happening around the world as well. And I was reading an article by a leading climate scientist who said, well, it's over. Like, we can't do anything now. There's nothing we can do to stop the chaos that's coming our way. I'm hunkering down. I'll send you the link and you can pop it in the notes because I don't remember his name. But he said, I'm hunkering down. It's all about community. It's all about neighborhood. We just have to start connecting because this is how we'll work out what to do within our small, I'm saying it, communities. Yeah.
You mentioned this point earlier about incentives. You didn't use the word incentives, you used the word capitalism. But that is right, which is that our society has an incentive structure, and that incentive structure trickles all the way down. So this cascade of effects that we're talking about, the cheapening of the word community, why is that? Well, because I wanted a nicer word than audience, which is what I was building. Why was I building an audience? Because I want to sell to them. Why do I want to sell to them? Because I need to make as much money as possible and have that hockey stick growth. Even if, by the way, like I used to be in entrepreneurship, but let's remove all of that context. Like, even if I'm just me at work, because I want the promotion, because I want the bigger house, because I want more vacation. So I need to be up. But it is like, what does up really mean? And so we started a root cause, which is like an economic system that became an ideology. And that ideology feels like it's part of this, but then the ideology is baked into a culture. I have this challenge. So to tell a little story, I was once delivering a program which meant that this was just after the last election. I was at the Labour Party conference, which was a few weeks or a couple of months after the last election we had here in the UK. And I was at a panel at the event that was 3 MPs, maybe a minister, and then a couple externals, about what we do about the startup ecosystem to improve or encourage more startups and more diverse-led startups in the UK. Sounds like a bit left, but bear with me. So it's this conversation. It's a lot of politicking and pandering and a lot of empty words. So I ask this question when it comes around to Q&A, and I say, okay, do we have a culture issue here? So what I mean is, we don't have a culture where people are encouraged to do the things, think the way, etc., that Americans do. The politicians will say, we can compete with Americans because we have all this talent, we have all this, that, and the other. And I go, but our people don't want that, or they don't think that way, or the way we like to work is different, or the way, and by the way, not all of this is necessarily like quote unquote good. I say quote unquote because it's not always good and bad, it's more helpful and unhelpful. But we also have a culture that can put down entrepreneurs. You're trying really hard to do that thing, sit back down. I can't tell you how many founders have told me, like, all my old friends, like, they all talk down to me, or they all have this weird, like, passive aggressive jealousy because my business is now going well. Or so these are cultural hindrances. Some of them are hindrances because of natural reasons. Some are hindrances because we maybe mistreat each other culturally in certain ways. And so I said, okay, at what point is this a culture issue or a culture challenge, not issue? Because if it's culture, no policy is going to affect that. Enough people's desires day to day in the moment have to be significantly enough changed that enough action takes place until you got a critical mass for long enough that culture starts to change. And so it sounds like we're describing, what I really want to understand here is the problem really just us? And therefore, if the solution is us, what part of us will create the real tangible change? Do we need culture change? And if so, what do we do about it? And with the work that you're describing, where does that critical mass happen? Because that almost sounds like it's a little too little too late. Like, again, to play devil's advocate, right? Like, I love what you're describing, but is it too little too late if really what we're working against is beast that is culture.
I had a really interesting chat with someone the other day about creating a genuine opposition to the problem. So I see so many incredible local initiatives. I'm on so many spotlight calls where this incredible initiative in the northeast of England is revolutionizing children's school dinners, for example. And we're all there going, yay, this is amazing. That I think what we need is some kind of glue to just put that all in one very easy to understand opposition brand. And, the person I was talking with is an incredible brain in this world. He's had this idea, and I'm gonna say it: the Band of Britain, like Robin Hood's Band of Merry Men.
Oh, I see.
The Band of Britain. And he was like, it's not going to happen because it has too many connotations that aren't very helpful. Robbing the rich to feed the poor and all of that. But what I loved about just the concept of a brand that you can get behind. So whatever you're doing, whether you're a local community organizer in Hartlepool, whether you're creating assembly culture in Luton, whether you're trying to knit together your community in Port Talbot, you know that you're part of the Band of Britain, or insert more appropriate title. I feel that we just all need to feel that we're doing the right thing under a large banner, no matter what flavor of good you're doing, that we're all part of this. But I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer, other than giving it a name. I don't know how you actually then channel all of that. But, Reform's managing it.
Well, they're capitalizing on anger and dissatisfaction.
So the Band of Britain would capitalize on the absolute opposite, which I think taps into more of that innate humanity that I was talking about at the beginning.
This is interesting because I tends to break things down into whether we're living in survival mode or creation mode.
Oh, I love that.
Now, survival mode is anything that exists to keep our physical body alive. Any emotional experience. Fear, anger, hatred, rage, ego, lust, all these exist in survival. When you move beyond that, you cross what we call the line into the heart space and above. And that's when you start working in creation mode, which is love, clarity, wholeness, gratitude, togetherness, a healthy level of passion and excitement and vision for the future. And at its core, what that means, though, is you can break those down into two different emotional spaces. So some might argue that everything at its core is one of two things, fear or love. Now, reform, for example, is therefore capitalizing on fear. If I don't like that person and I hate that that's going on and I hate that policy and that's why I'm going to vote for you, is that coming out from love or fear? Now, if I'm coming from a place of I want this improvement, I want to go towards this, then I have to be in a space of love. But that's not what actually any of our political parties are capitalizing on right now. But I think this sounds like we're going beyond politics. We're going on to movements, period, right? So this isn't a political conversation. This is a movement conversation. This is what culture we want to be in. If I love this culture, great. And that's what I want to create, great. And I move towards the thing I do want. And now I'm in a space of creation. We do not live in a world where the vast majority of human beings operate from the heart space, from a place of love. And the best it sounds like any of us can do is become that ourselves and then do our best to bring other people together underneath that too. So then the question becomes, how do we move from fear? So this is my question for you now, to your best understanding or whatever your answer would be. How do we move from fear into love?
We need spaces to do that. We need physical spaces where we can come together. We need to bring the fireside back. Now, I'm lucky enough to work in the assembly culture ecosystem, and there are many organizations operating now across the UK trying to create assemblies. So there are plenty of ways that if you're listening to this and you're thinking, hang on, what? I want to be part of an assembly. Just see if there's one locally happening near you. It could be through Humanity Project, or it could be through any of the others in the ecosystem. I used to run a community cafe, and there are so many spaces now that have a catering infrastructure, like cafes, restaurants, but that are also unlocking their potential for community and social good. I do believe that these spaces are vital because we need to be moving into seeing each other again in real life, looking at each other in the eye. And when I used to run my cafe, we were the launch pad of over 75 projects that still exist in the world that are doing good, and my cafe was the soil for that. Now, I can't claim anything for that. All I did was open a space and say, come and use it for good. As long as it's going to be improving the world in some way, come and use it. We were the launch pad of the Museum of Happiness. We were the space where Action for Happiness's Happier Living course was started. If you're listening and you're a Londoner, you may know Chuku's restaurant in Tottenham, Fat Macy's restaurant in West London, and Mike's Table, which is a pay it forward restaurant concept. They all started at the Canvas alongside countless other incredible projects. All I did was open a cafe and say, do you want to use it for good? And they flooded in. Also, I've been at trade fairs where someone's been spooning me some stew and then went, hang on, are you the owner of the Canvas? We created our business plan there. I was like, what? And they went, yeah. The space was just so conducive to creativity that it was just the perfect place.
How did you make that happen? The question I was going to ask you is, what does space actually mean, right? Because space has layers to it. What does space mean, and how are you engineering that space to actually achieve that? Because there are lots of places where you can just walk. We're in one now, right? We just basically walked in. I booked a free meeting room. We walked into what is basically a corporate cafe. And but I promise you, having worked across dozens of entrepreneurship spaces over the years, most people don't feel that sense of excited, cross-pollinating togetherness. So even people who have lots of budget, which you didn't have, you operated on a shoestring budget and still managed all of that. Even people who have that budget, they don't know how to make the space a space, if that makes sense. So take us back to the beginning. What is this space, and how do you engineer that?
So I knew that I wanted to create a space where I could ask people questions about what it was like being them. Now, the space was called the Canvas. The reason it was called the Canvas is that every single wall had a question on it, and the questions were designed to open up people's memories, aspirations, secrets, stories. So the questions were things like, what's your happy place? Tell us about your grandparents, which is such a good one. Name a book you couldn't put down. What recipe reminds you of your childhood? And these were printed on the walls of the cafe, and everyone who came into the cafe could get a grey Sharpie and answer the questions on the walls. That's why it was called the Canvas. What that did was, first of all, people walked in and went, oh, this is mine. This space is kind of mine.
Cool.
And it's yours, and it's not, I am not separate from this space. This is our space. And then they'd answer the questions, which immediately gave them ownership over that space because they'd written on it. And then they'd start coming back to see their comment and the evolution of their comment, because people would be like, oh, I also loved that recipe, and here's my adaptation. People would comment on the comments. But also, if you're reading, especially think of the question, tell us about your grandparents. If you stand and read that wall, you're reminded that no matter what someone else's background, no matter where they grew up, no matter what beliefs they hold, we have all got memories or stories of our grandparents. And we've all got happy places, and we've all got secret celebrity crushes. And I believe it just reduced, and if anything, it just removed barriers from people. And then we sweated our community assets. So we went, right, we've got a catering infrastructure. What can we do that's good with that? So we were vegan because it was the best choice for planet and for the animals. We had a pay it forward board, so people could come and donate for someone who couldn't afford it to have a coffee or a cake or a meal. We ran a food bank every Friday morning, and we also sent food into the local community that was funded weirdly, by a Gilbert and George art project. I don't know if you've heard of Gilbert and George, hugely famous art pair who lived just around the corner. So we just went, right, we've got this space. We've made it feel like it belongs to the community. There's that word again. And now how can we sweat our social assets? So I agree with you. Yeah, loads of cafes aren't doing that. But I'm interested. So I have a thought experiment that I'm currently pondering on, which is I was offered, when my cafe was forced to close by a very inhuman landlord association, thanks to COVID, when we were forced to close, I had a fair bit of interest in reopening it and sort of replicating it as quite a sort of robust social franchise. Okay. And I knew that wasn't the way I wanted to go. I didn't want to create competition for existing cafes. But there's this amazing author called John Alexander. He wrote a book called Citizens. I urge you all to read it. John himself said to me, if there could be a canvas in every neighborhood, that could cause a shift of citizen behavior. People, if you created these vehicles in every neighborhood, that could be a very powerful enabler of a citizen shift. And I thought to myself, well, there are cafes in every neighborhood already. So my thought experiment is, can you take a cafe and support that owner to add the elements that the canvas had that made it such a vital sanctuary of hope and a beacon for community? Can you do that with existing spaces rather than just sow canvas seeds everywhere and create loads of competition? So that I am thinking about this, because to go back to your original question, what do we need to do? How can we do this? I think it's creating spaces, because I saw people walk into my cafe as a consumer and leave as a citizen. And it blew my mind. I would watch it.
What's your story? What got you into doing this? As most of us, I've heard so many social good, social action stories or initiatives or plans or ideas, and most of them stay ideas. What brought you to the place that you've just described? And what was the special sauce that you think made it possible?
Oh, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I know that I don't have a very strong need for money. Now, I am saying this I'm in a very privileged position. I live in one of the most wealthiest countries in the world. But I've always sort of gone, okay, money's come in. Oh, what can I do? What can I do with that to make things a bit better? Not for me, but for others. Money comes in and I'm like, how can I use this for something good? So I guess that's what made me do it rather than be too frightened to do it, because when I lost my cafe, I lost more money than I lost a ton of money, right? I am just so fired up to try to do everything I can to. I'm always looking for opportunities to make a good impact in the world. And the thing I've always wished I had was influence. Not fame. I'm not talking about fame. I'm talking about influence. I'm an ideas person. And I've had so many ideas along the way. And I thought, oh, gosh, if I was the daughter of someone famous, I would just be able to make this happen because I'd have influence. And I don't have an awful lot of influence because I'm a regular me. But I am envious of people with influence, because I think if I did have it, I'd be out there. I'd be doing so much. But in terms of my childhood, it was fab. It was very normal. And I don't know where this drive has come from. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, we don't need to know. Sometimes we're obsessed with knowing why. And actually it matters. What matters is just that we are.
I once had a real crisis because when I lost all this money, when I lost the cafe, my husband, who'd been kind of propping me up in every way, I knew I had to go and get a job. And the role I kind of fell into was this operational lead at Humanity Project, and I was doing it ad hoc around the kids. I had a 2 and a 3-year-old at the time. And so I was doing this work, and sometimes I got paid, sometimes I didn't, sometimes there was money, sometimes there wasn't. But I believed that there would be a point where I could have a stable income from it. But then there was this gap of a couple of months where I wasn't going to get paid. And I said to my husband, I don't know what to do here, because I know I owe it to the family to go and earn money, but I also think that there will be money in a couple of months. I just have to hold out. And I was talking to a friend about it, going, I just think I just need to go and get a job. And she said, no. She said, for those of us in the position, or those who are in the position where we can just, if we can hold out so that we can be paid to do good, we should. And I did. I held out, and I didn't get paid for a couple of months. And then some money came in, and then I started to be paid to do good. And that felt so much better than going, right, well, I can't possibly do anything for free. I'll go off and become a corporate social responsibility person in a corporate. Because that would not have made me happy. And I would have just been chasing a payslip just for reasons of guilt, I guess.
So this is really personally relevant to me, actually, because I wish I had someone to say that to me. And thankfully, I didn't technically need it, but I almost needed it several times, of saying, like, those of us privileged enough to hold out until we can get paid for doing good should. That's really powerful. Because I've been at the end of my financial tether for a while, and I keep finding ways of extending it, including like selling off assets, which doesn't sound like a privileged position to be in, but actually it is. Because I was smart enough with my money back when I had more income to be able to do that, and that's created space for opportunity, for learning, for growth, for doing this. That's really powerful. That's a really interesting take on using your privilege for good. When I think of space, I think of anything theoretically, physically, materially, in person, conceptually, biologically, energetically, mentally, emotionally. So any level or place where there is the space, the gap. Space is anywhere where one can inject energy that turns possibility into actuality. So when you were creating a space, you weren't seeing it as a cafe. You were seeing it as where energy could be injected such that possibility turned into actuality, such that those business ideas became, right, were birthed into existence. Someone had the mind baby, and then it became some paper, and then it eventually became that business that you ran into years later and you didn't even know, or whatever, right? There's a selflessness that is required to see space that way. And there is a vision that is required to see space beyond a physical space. So we're in a room right now. There's space in this room, but there's layers and layers and layers of space beyond the space in this room. There's space in between our thoughts, just pausing, and that's where innovation is. And to be able to zoom out and see space is something much bigger than just the material. You created space on multiple levels. No, you didn't just have a physical space. I am a little concerned that there's too much, as a result of that incentive structure we discussed earlier, there's almost too much selfishness to see space for what it really is. And I don't know what to do about that part. There's the, come back to the heart-centered space, move yourself out of fear, work on your fear so you can move into that space of love. Okay, cool. But most of us still have to pay the bills at the end of the day.
Yeah. I know what you mean, and I agree. And I described earlier this vision of uniting and connecting existing cafes and in breathing the vision of the Canvas into them in a way where they don't lose their identity, they don't lose their core business model, but they enhance. And I believe that their footfall, their customer loyalty, their staff retention, and their own personal, the owners, their own personal purpose for running that cafe would all be improved. However, I'm going to say that again because that I just knocked my mic.
Sorry.
I believe that their purpose for running their business would all be improved. However, I have had some pretty significant figures in my life going, I don't think you can do it because you ran that cafe and there's a certain energy in you. And let me say, that's not taking away from the energy of cafe owners. My word, you've got to be made of steel to run a cafe. But they're saying, we feel like you are the magic source. And so the reason that your cafe worked was because you were there breathing this vision. And like you say, I do see the potential of spaces in a way that maybe others don't. But I am hopeful because of examples like Parkrun. Now, Parkrun, I think is a phenomenon and I run a Parkrun every Saturday morning, and I'm there with hundreds of people who run 5K, kids, grandparents, great-grandparents, everyone in between, and it's run by volunteers. And there must be a pretty hefty, I know there's a hefty kind of sponsorship, brand attachment chunk behind it. There's a chunky thing behind it because it's a really well-run app. And it's a really well-designed system, but the actual doing of it is 20 volunteers, 10 volunteers maybe, who set out the course and are marshals on the course. And it runs the one I go to runs like clockwork, and I've done it around the country, and everyone I've gone to has been hundreds of people run by volunteers. That's gotta be hopeful, right? If Parkrun in 20 years can go from one guy and his mates running around a park in Wimbledon to, I think it's something like over 46,500 locations worldwide, that's surely got to give us some hope that you can create an open source, heart-filled, love-focused concept that people will get behind, and there's no money involved.
No,
not for the people taking part.
No, because that doesn't need to be. And actually, that's the answer. Is like look at movements that have worked like that, because they're the things that go under the radar almost.
Yeah.
Like we know what those are now. Okay, but we know what parkruns are, but they're not a global famous business or whatever. So there's almost like, find those movements that exist as a movement and reverse engineer what made them work. And usually the answer is something that it doesn't sound super practical and tangible. People wanted this. We created a model. We made the model accessible. There's a similar model, I think started somewhere in Ireland. I'm going to misquote a whole bunch, but their thing was surf at the morning sunrise. Yeah. So they put out the word, grab your surfboards, come when the sun rises, whatever. Now this is Ireland. It's cold.
Yeah.
It's cold. It's super. It's like I think they're like 5 a.m. So they're not even always sunrise. Sometimes it's pre-sunrise because for a big chunk of the year the sun will rise super late and set super early, right? So, and the water is just freezing, and they were like, no one's going to come. And the first proper one they run, they show up. 200 people start just walking over the horizon. It's like, what is going on? Anyway, that's not a very detail-filled story because I don't remember the details, unfortunately, but these things actually exist worldwide. And they're the kind of things you see on like positive news Instagram pages. But for the most part, we're stuck with the fear-mongering of the normal news. And this is, I think, what happens when, to some of the things we've talked about off camera, consumers become citizens. Because it's the difference between low agency and high agency. It's the difference between reactive and proactive. So let's end this off by understanding what you mean when you say citizens. I know you've got a model you really like. Let's talk about it.
Oh, I love it. So John Alexander is a beautiful thinker. He created the New Citizen Project, and he used to be in advertising, and he felt really stuck and icky about his role in just making the rich richer, and he knew he wanted to do something different. He created the New Citizen Project, and their role is they're a consultant they work with businesses to try and involve their membership and their customers more to sort of like come into this and be part of it, rather than we don't just sell, we engage and we work with them. But what I find very hopeful is his book, Citizens. I read it when I was still bitterly grieving the loss of the Canvas, and I was in my best friend's house in Devon looking at the sea, and I was reading John's book, and my jaw dropped open because I read this quote, which is describing a citizen, and it's people who actively shape the world around us, who cultivate meaningful connections to their community, who can imagine a different and better life, who care and take responsibility, and who create opportunities for others to do the same. And there's me picking my jaw up from the floor, because that's how people had behaved in my cafe. And so having gone from not even understanding this, I mean, is it an academic concept? Is it? It's a social concept, isn't it? The idea, the concept of a citizen. Not a citizen because of your passport either. Let's be very clear. It's a citizen of the world. It's not the citizen of a country. And I first of all, I felt so amazed that unwittingly I had created a space where people were behaving like citizens. But that there was then this movement that John has inspired. So do look up John Alexander, Jon Alexander. I think he's doing a TV show at the moment with Baratunde Thurston, who had done a podcast called How to Citizen, so citizen being a verb. And so, yeah, he's becoming a real mover and shaker in this world. And I'm lucky enough to sort of be, as anyone can be, part of this network and joining calls and being inspired. And maybe that's that Band of Britain. Maybe the word citizen is the brand that we all need to get under. And where John's theory of change comes from how for years we were subjects. Years and years and years, humans were subjects. And then when we stepped into being consumers 85 years ago, let's say, it was seen as a positive step. It actually felt like a positive thing for humans to be having, we're moving into a capitalist world and people could have some money and they can do their own things. They can build things for their family and they can take care of their own destiny. But we all know the consumer story is dead. I think everyone does, even the ones that are still in it. I think we all know it's dead. And there'll be a pull back to being subjects, I think. There will be. But the way that the proactive step is for a citizen future.
When you gave me that definition, I realized it is almost the same as my definition of a leader.
Really?
Very, very similar. And because I do not see leader as a title or leadership or actions. I think we are. So this show, fun fact, back in 2021, I started this show online. It was called The Mindful Leader. And after a season, I changed it to Lost in Searching. And then I stopped believing in myself. So I gave up for 3 years and came back at it last year. And the reason it started with that and went through that journey of progression, it's almost like evolving with myself, is because I started with the thesis of I want to understand what leadership really means and how to be that and how to find that. And then I realized, especially when restarting it, the end kind of Q3 2024 last year, that I had my definition, which is that we're all leaders already. And this is the key word, which went by so fast in what you just said. Out of everything you just said, the key word for me is a verb. Because what I realized is we are all leaders. We just don't act like it. So when I say, are you a good person? People will usually say, yes, I'm a good person. I say, okay, you were having a bad day. You snapped at me, yelled at me, told me off, were mean to me. So are you a bad person now? And they go, no, that's not me. That's just what I was acting like in that moment. But at my core, at my default, I'm a good person. I think leadership is the same. Or I think being a leader is the same. Except it isn't a minority of the time, it's the majority of the time. We can all be more of the leader we already are and be that person more often. By doing the verb of being the person we are most meant to be. But instead we get into that fear, into that survival mode, into that tunnel vision, into that noise. And act like that person we can most be so much less. And then at what point have you crossed the line? Have you crossed the threshold too much of my life is in that survival mode and I'm not being a leader basically whatsoever. And what I wrote down for us to talk about was, what is the difference between a citizen and a consumer, or another keyword is user, right? Super common with apps, which is interesting because the same word we use for drug addicts. A subject, right? We have a king, we have the king's subjects on that side. And then on this side, we've got citizen. Well, what that really means is we've got being a leader, which is the citizen of the world that you are, as the creation mode manifestation, or the manifestation of creation mode of that place of love. So now I'm getting this picture of, we have two big modes we can operate in. Mode one is survival mode, where the core of everything is fear, and we are at best consumers, users, subjects. And we've got crossing the line into the threshold of creation mode. We're operating from a space of love, where we are the global citizens and the leaders that we all already are, that we are all meant to be more of.
I'm loving this. And the word that comes up to me is around a sense of personal responsibility. We can all feel too small to make a difference. And then obviously there's that incredible quote around, well, if you think you're too small to make a difference, imagine, like, think about sleeping in a bed with a mosquito, in the bedroom with a mosquito. And there's also that lovely story about the beach that's covered with starfish, and there's a little boy throwing them one by one, and a guy says, "What are you doing? How are you ever going to make a difference? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these." And the kid picks one up, chucks it in, and says, "I made a difference to that one." So this idea that we're too small to make a difference is rubbish. Look at Greta Thunberg. And if we all see that when we step up as that responsible leader, that citizen of the world, we are being a role model for others. I see this in the village. I'm a parent. Good parenting, good citizen behavior breeds more, because you see someone doing the right thing and you go, yeah, I can also do the right thing. There is no point in believing that just carrying on as normal is going to get us out of this mess. But there's also no point in getting overwhelmed by, well, I came in today and I was feeling very sad because I'd read a news story about the crisis in Gaza. And I said, I want to hug every child. I just want to help, and I can't. And I can't there. I can't. But I can talk about it, and I can model the love that I want to give those children to the children I am seeing around. And then it's that replicated. It's that each of us taking agency, responsibility, and being what's the word I'm looking for? Being the inspiration for everyone else. I don't think I'm making myself very clear here, because I actually get quite emotional about this sort of thing. I get very upset about the apathy that I'm seeing all around me. Well, what's the point? What's the point? Now, I've stopped recycling. What's the point? Well, we were going to get an electric car. What's the point? There's a fantastic book called Not the End of the World, and I've forgotten the woman who wrote it, but she's incredible, and she's a statistician. And she actually talks about the things that we can all do. So eat less beef, big one, get an electric car, reduce our flight travel. But she looks at all the various crises, the climate crises, through every single lens: carbon, water pollution, air pollution. And she comes up with sort of key things that we can all do. And it makes me very cross when friends or family members will say, well, what's the point? What's the point? So, well, if every one of us just followed those a bit more, think of the difference. There's billions of us. It will make a huge difference.
Now, I've actually lived, talking to the mosquito example, I've actually lived in places where there have been bugs that keep you up at night. And you're going crazy because all you want to do is sleep. And I think that makes it an interesting analogy. As we start to wrap up today, there's one specific challenge. I want to hear your experience and understanding of how we overcome. If there's something that's going to stop us from moving from fear into love, it is the manifestations of that fear. And I think there is a quote-unquote epidemic, also an overused word, but an epidemic of challenges that result from fear or manifestations of fear. And the big one that jumps out to me is anxiety. So when you gave me this, theoretical plan I could follow earlier of go around to your neighbors and get to know them and ask them certain questions, there's an anxiety behind that for the average person. I think even a non-average person, a vast majority of us go, actually, when I say what's the point, actually that's actually maybe a big one too. A lot of like, should I do that? What are they going to think of me? What if they're busy? What if I'm bothering them? And culture can make that worse too. And then when I think about younger people, there's so much anxiety around, when I speak to younger people, or I used to work with young people, I went to an event which was young people presenting on stage, school-age children, secondary school children the other day, university students very often. It's just like so much, like I'm not comfortable with that. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. There's just something about growing up in this age has meant that we're always a little bit concerned about other people.
Yeah.
Call it not being used to being around them because we're on our screens instead. Call it growing up with news that's always negative and scary. But overcoming this anxiety feels like the biggest really practical blocker that's also quite challenging to do anything about because it's about your mental health, right? So how would you encourage someone who's feeling anxious about doing some of what you've described to start to overcome this? Because that is the solution, is like build it up like a muscle, but I've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's imagine life if we don't. Imagine if we just got more and more isolated. Imagine anyone who is, genuinely connected into the climate crisis. Imagine a world where we don't even know our neighbor's name when people from other countries start coming in desperately needing our help. And imagine if we can't even call as a neighborhood, as a street. That's probably not very helpful. You're probably listening to this going, well, shut up. Who are you? But I think it's, I'm not really sure what else to say. Because
here's how we could do it. Right?
Yeah.
How old is your oldest child?
7.
7. Okay. Let's say they're a few years old. Let's say 5 years to 12 years old. Okay. They come up to you and say, Mom, you told me to go make friends with this person. Or you want us to go around to our neighbor's house to have a chat about what they'd like us to do. Whatever. Or how we're going to organize. Or how they're feeling today. I'm really nervous and scared about doing that. What would you say to them?
Oh, okay. I'd say, okay, who do you know who wouldn't be scared to do that? And should we go and ask them? And maybe what might help you feel more confident? Could you be offering something? Maybe you could be there with some homemade something, or maybe you actually, maybe there's a real reason to do it. So maybe let's organize a barbecue for next Saturday, and let's make it let's do a competition. How many of our neighbors can we get along? So yeah, add games, add someone who's going to make you feel confident. Don't do it. I mean, safeguarding disclaimer. Don't do anything you feel genuinely just uncomfortable doing. But yeah, don't do it on your own. Do it with other people. But also, just ask yourself, can I be the leader and the responsible citizen of this world that this world needs? And the answer is yes, you can. And then you go, okay, great, I can do this. So what scenario needs to be around me in order to make me feel even more comfortable to do that?
Space. Creating space. Yeah. That's another way in which space is nonlinear, right? So that space can be mental and emotional space. Yeah. I have more space to consider this because I have teammates in the form of my friends or parents or whatever. Yeah.
Earlier on, I mentioned conversations on trains, and I was thinking about a specific one because I once sat down on this absolutely packed train, and I sat down next to this woman who was crying, and I knew she was crying, and she knew I knew she was crying, and we sat there maybe for like 4 stops, and I can't remember how, but our eyes caught each other, and we started talking, and it was about a boy, because it's always about a boy. But we, for like 10 minutes maybe before she got off. We talked and we didn't know each other's names, but we connected on such a deep level. And the hug we gave one another when we said goodbye, we were shaking with sobs at that moment. And I'm not saying you're going to have that on every single time you knock on a door, but it's just another human being on the other side. And they are probably feeling just as frightened and as disconnected as you are. And they will, I truly believe that the love, the intention of love that you bring to that conversation, whether it's on the train, whether it's at the bus stop, whether it's at the park, whether it's in the queue for train tickets, we have all got the power to just reach out with love to our fellow humans and just make everything feel a little less lonely and disconnected.
I love this. Ruth, I've got a closing question that I ask everyone who comes onto the show. The show is called Lost and Searching, and I'd love to know, at this juncture in your life right now, what is the number one question that you find yourself searching for the answer to?
How, and to use your language, how can I step into the most powerful leadership role that I can be in the world? What's my next step? I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was running the Canvas, and then it was closed down. And I'm a parent, and I work for this incredible charity, and the Canvas is still there flickering, and I'm really searching for how best to pour my energies to do good. And that is, I would imagine, is probably, for people who are listening to this, I suspect that's quite familiar. I think we're all trying to do that, aren't we? How can I push more love into the world? How can I do that without, and this is what I did before when I was running the Canvas, I was doing that at the detriment of like the people around me. So thank goodness, the man who I love more in the world than anyone else stuck by me throughout all that. And we now have 2 kids together, but I was a horrible partner. And I think I was a very distant mother in those first few years because the Canvas was my first baby. So it's that balance. How can we do good in the world, but also be there for the people who need us most directly in our lives? And that imagine that on a billion replication scale. Yeah. Come on, people.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really important. And I think it's the difference between being a leader and a leadership role. Right? You already are the leader that you want to embody the role. And the world will unfold what exactly that role is. And the more that you are this leader that you are, the more that the world can give you to eventually craft or find or step into or discover that role. It's just a matter of time. Mm-hmm. This has been really cool. I really appreciate you coming down to have this conversation with me, for opening me up to a different way of seeing a high agency mindset and responsibility, and painting us a picture of what these cheapened words of community and connection really mean, helping apply them to space. And you've given me additions to models that I've been really interested in crafting to understand these concepts in my head. So I've just been so excited by this. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
And let us know when your block parties are happening and door knocking's going.
It's gonna be a while.
I believe in you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Evan.
Well, look at you, making it to the end of the episode. Welcome. There's a lot more for you to do. If you're still here, there's a full playlist on YouTube down below. There's a recommended video probably somewhere around the screen or down below, and so much more. give us a follow, help share if you're here. Hey, maybe you enjoyed it. And look, this show only grows with your help. So again, I know you're probably bored of hearing it, but it would mean the world to me if you help us out and paid it forward and shared it around. And hey, you never know how this will help someone else. So thank you so much for being here, for being a part of it. Lots of love, and here is to your success. See you soon.